So this presentation will be on posters and presentations at conferences. This won't necessarily apply to your PowerPoint presentations that you'll be doing for class, but you may take some of the tips for making the poster presentation for your slides to help you kind of get some ideas on what to include or what. Our objectives are to describe the structure of a conference, identify the strengths and weaknesses in a poster presentation, and understand expectations of an oral presentation. Research results are often publicly shared for the first time during an oral presentation or a poster presentation session at an academic or professional conference. The primary outcome of these conferences is to network with other professionals in the field. And presenting your new research at a conference can be a really great way to get feedback about a project and have new information to help improve or update your research that you're currently working on. Conferences are typically broken down into 4 parts. The keynote address, where one keynote speaker gives an overall lecture or presentation to the entire group of attendees on some topic that is chosen for that particular conference. Then there's business meetings, so there's typically a number of smaller groups that help to run the presentation or the organization that's presenting the conference, and this is where these people will meet in person and go over different topics. Then the 2 main portions of the conference that we're going to talk about in more detail are oral presentations and poster sessions. Oral presentations require speaking in front of an audience and possibly facing an open-ended question and answer period in which your work is discussed with an audience. And then poster sessions allow attendees of the conference to browse posters at their own pace and interact with presenters if they would like more information about a project. In order to present at a conference, you're typically asked to submit an abstract that's considered by the organization committee. So these abstracts are then distributed to a number of experts in the field, and those that are rated highest by those experts are selected to be included in the conference. If your abstract's accepted, you're expected to attend and pay for the conference to present your poster. Here's an example that your book gives of a poster presentation template. So you can see at the top there's a title and your author information. Then you have the introduction section, the method section, the results sections, and the conclusion, as well as references and acknowledgments. This next slide shows different ways you could lay out your poster to have a good visual balance of figures and text with separation of white space. So balance occurs when your images and text are reflected at least approximately across a central, horizontal, vertical, or diagonal axis. So this axis is known as the axis of symmetry. So you can see the horizontal, diagonal, and the horizontal and vertical symmetry are more engaging than that bottom right asymmetry. There's just a lot of text in that very left column of the last example. To distinguish between good and bad posters, you want to consider the following. Good posters are clear and concise. They have a strong use of visual headings for key points. They make use of visuals like graphs, tables, and images, and it's also readable. An effective poster is focused on a single message. The graphics are allowed, the graphs and images tell a story without using too much text. And then they're in order, which keeps the sequence obvious to a viewer. Bad posters have no clear structure, they have inconsistent text sizes and fonts, and they exclude key information. So on D2L, I have a PDF document for a handout that kind of goes into more detail about each of these categories. But if you're ever asked to do a poster presentation, you want to go over your poster before printing it out with this 60-second poster evaluation. So you want to go through and look at the overall appearance. Is it cluttered and slobby? Is it pleasant to look at? Does it give the impression of nice graphics? Uses good colors and text? Is there white space? So are there sections of the poster that are separated and there's room to rest your eyes when you're reading? Next, is there a text and graphics balance? So do you have too much text or not enough text, or is there a balance between those so there's an even dispersion of text and graphics in your poster? Next, you want to consider your text size. Is it too small to view comfortably from a distance of 4 to 5 feet away? You want to make sure that both the main text and the text in your figures is large enough to read. Next is organization and flow. So you want it to be implicit about how you're really going to go through your poster. So are there headings that apply organization and flow, or is there explicit numbering with rows and bars that kind of separate your paper, your presentation into different sections? Is the author identified? So is there enough information to contact the author about further research? So this should have your phone number or email or your actual address, so that people who are looking at your presentation can contact you if you aren't standing there, if they have questions about it. Next is your research objective. This should be explicit, so it should be included under some kind of heading such as objectives, aims, or goals. This way it's easy for viewers to pick out what your objective is for your research. The main points should be explicitly labeled as either main points, conclusions, or results. So it should be very specific what you found in your research or what you are looking to do with your research. And then there should be a summary, or maybe this is included in the conclusion section, of just exactly what you did find. This is an example of my poster presentation from when I was in the MPH program at Westchester. So this was my final project before I graduated. You had to make this poster presentation, and one of the things that's good about this poster is that it uses a light colored background and dark letters for contrast. It's stuck to a theme of 2 or 3 colors, so there's the red and the black, which is also the colors of the program I was working for, and you want to stick to those 2 or 3 colors to not overload and confuse your viewers. Additionally, you don't want to use dark backgrounds with light text because it's hard for people to read that. So some of the not so great parts of this poster is that there's a lot of text. Now, part of this was because the assignment for this class was to include a lot of text. It needed to be very specific about the things that were included, but I wouldn't present this poster at a conference just because there aren't any images that kind of highlight what I found. This next poster is similar to the other one. It's also something that I had worked on, but this was actually presented at a conference. So some things I would change are to include some graphics or some flowcharts to try and break up the text. If you look at the strength and limitation section, it's actually in a different font than some of the others, and they're not all the same size. And it would be very difficult to read this from a few feet away. But some things that are good, again, it's a light colored background with bold colored text, dark colored text. And the sections are separated. Background, methods, results, conclusion. And then within each of those sections, they're separated into the burden, previous research, and you can identify here the study purpose, as well as in the methods section, you can see the participants' design and measures, what statistical analysis was done. In the results, you can see a description of the sample, and then a summary of what we found in our statistical analysis. And then in the conclusion, it breaks into two sections, the strengths and limitations of the study, as well as opportunities to apply this information for interventions. So that opportunities for intervention is things that would be useful to someone who's interested or who works with college athletes, things that could help them to create an intervention or to really influence their athletes in helping them to avoid unintentional injury when drinking. So one thing that is a helpful hint, if you print your poster on one 8x11 piece of paper, you should be able to read everything, including the text in your figures, comfortably. If you can't do that, then your text is definitely too small for the presentation. This is another example of an applied learning experience poster. So this was done a number of years ago, it's probably 7 years ago, by my mentor and one of her students. And it does break it down into the background, methods, results, and conclusion, and then each of those sections are broken down further. So if you do go on to get your a master's degree at West Chester, this is something that you may use to kind of base your presentation off of for that. However, if you were going to present this at a conference, it's a little bit hard to read because a small font was used. The title and author information is useful, but you would want to include an email address of one of the researchers so people could contact you. And then there are a lot of words in this. Even though there are several tables, there's a lot of text that goes along with this. So this next poster is, again, another example of an applied learning experience project. So it's broken up, as you can see, into more categories. So there's the introduction to the problem, background of the project, what the goal of the project was, the methods and activities that were done, the results section. Something I don't like is that the results section goes into the third column, and then the numbering is not contained in that box of results in that third column. Then finally, there's the recommendations, conclusion, and references section on this. So if you're going to use headings like this, you want to be sure that your headings, including title, the section titles, and figure captions, summarize, organize, are hierarchical, and are bold. So when you summarize, you want to use headings as an opportunity to summarize your work in large letters. So someone who's rushing through the poster presentation should be able to get kind of the main points from your headings. Then your good headings are a part of the visual grammar that helps move readers through your poster in a logical format. So being hierarchical, this means that if your point's more important, the type or the font size should be larger. And then bolding, you want to use this to make the strongest statement. So this next poster is created and presented for a graduate biostatistics class. And then it was presented at other venues focusing on biological conservation. So some good points are the title asks a provocative question, and the subtitle kind of defines the focus of that question. It's succinct, introducing the issues. The methods are concise. The graphs are interpreted by their short text boxes, so it helps move the reader quickly through the presentation. The results and conclusions are related back to the objectives. The vertical lines between the sections and the numbered headings make the flow clear. The results are the centerpiece of the poster, and there's lots of graphics, which is good. The main points in the discussion are bolded and obvious, so this is easy for readers to identify the main points if they're in a hurry. Some negative points, the author information is very small, so that should be larger. The large image of the manatee in this is not a really great picture. It's kind of low resolution, so if this was printed in a very large printout, like for a bulletin board or something, it would be very pixelated. The fonts on the graphs are very small, so they're hard to read. The introduction could be improved if it was bulleted. The bullets are too far away from the text, so that might not seem super important, but it does it could be shortened. And then a better name for the fifth section would be conclusions, because they're not really discussing their results, they're just kind of providing you with the conclusion. So at first look, this is a great poster, but then because of the coloring and the highlighting. But if you look a little closer, there's a lot of text. The text in the figures is hard to read. The method section is a really great part of this because it does have a layout that's really clear and easy to follow. So that flowchart just describes the steps and the order that they were done in. The reference section and the acknowledgments are a little bit large compared to the rest of the text, and then the background and the discussion could probably be bulleted and paraphrased to be a little bit shorter. So this poster was presented at an annual meeting of the Ecological Society of America. So the title asks an interesting question. These are some good things. The headings, the white text on the blue background, provide a brief description of the poster. So if you only read the headings, you get a good idea of what the work's about. The method section is concise. The poster is very visual. The images are helpful in making the points they're trying to make. The results and conclusions are concise, and they relate back to the objectives. The color scheme is simple. The font size is generally large enough, except in the figures. Some negative points, it does look a little crowded. There's not a lot of blank or white space. While some people like the heading blocks like this, it doesn't provide a clear direction about what section contains what information. Some of the headings are a little long, especially in that middle column, and they don't really tell you what's the introduction, what's the methods, what's the results, and what the conclusion is specifically. Then if you look at the 4 scatter plots that are there's 3 in the middle column and 1 in the very far right column, they're very small and you really can't read what they're even showing. So that's not something. So this poster has a great title. It's very descriptive. They also have, their references are highlighted, but they're smaller than the main text. And then the acknowledgements or funding section is also highlighted, but it's also smaller. Some of the good things about this are the different breakdowns of the headings, as well as the graphs of the maps that are shown. The flow might be a bit confusing for some people because there are so many columns, and then some of the headings are broken into subheadings, so that may be a bit confusing. And the images of the volunteers are not necessarily adding a whole lot to their presentation. So maybe taking those out would give them more room to increase those two map images in the bottom left. This poster was presented at a zoology department symposium, and it did win the award for best poster presentation. Now, I don't necessarily agree that this is the best poster, but I'm not sure what it was being compared to, so it's hard to say. Some positive points are that the title conveys the main message instantly, tells you exactly what their presentation's about. The context and objectives are clear, the methods are concise, the graphs are able to be interpreted by their titles, the results and conclusions are concise and really directly back to the objectives of the study. The color scheme is simple, and the font is large enough everywhere, including the graphics. So the title here, they have their name and contact information, which is super helpful for people who are interested in the topic and want more information. Some negative points, the results and conclusion don't relate back to the introduction section, so the introduction doesn't really introduce readers to what was done in the rest of the study. The title could probably be a little more direct. The water temperature determines sex of southern flounder may be a better descriptive title. The title font is a little bit small. Just because all of the other text is so large, it doesn't really stand out. And they could have improved by decreasing the amount of white space between the columns a little bit. At first look, this presentation looks really great. It's eye-catching because there's lots of different colors. But then, if you look a little closer, there's lots of graphics that are difficult to read from a distance. So some of the things that are difficult to read would be the examples from the social media posts in the far right of the flood alerts section. You would not be able to read those without being super close to the poster. The author information could be a lot larger, and the funding section could be summarized to be a lot more brief. I do like that they have the QR code so that you can get the e-handout from the website they have it posted at. But again, they didn't necessarily need to include all of the web address and information for that. They could have just said that there's a handout at that QR code. The organization is a little sloppy, even though they have the flowchart at the top that tells you the direction they want you to go. Just because there's so many colors and boxes, it's hard to kind of follow. Now I'll talk a little bit about preparing for an oral presentation at a conference. So typically you have about 15 minutes of speaking time. 10 to 12 of those minutes is your actual presentation, and then the rest of the time is left for questions from the audience, usually. So most people prepare a set of slides to guide their talk and provide additional information. So you can see on this slide, there's a list of the different slides that could be included for an oral presentation. So this may be something similar to what you want to use for your presentation for this class. A title slide that includes the title of the paper, the names of the authors, and the contact information for you as the presenter. Then another slide with the research goal, So it gives the key message of what you're talking about. Then an outline or summary or maybe objectives like I use in class. Next, a slide or two about the background and specific aims of the study. Here you can put in citations in smaller font to give the people viewing your presentation, a chance to find those resources. Next, you'll list the methods section. For this, they recommend 2 to 4 slides, just to kind of give the viewers an idea of what was actually done. The main part is the results section with 4 to 8 slides. So figures and tables of statistical results are usually simplified from what would be presented in an actual article to make it more easy to read during the presentation for viewers that are further away from the screen. Then there'd be a slide on strengths and limitations, a slide on the conclusions or the key messages of the research. Then sometimes you'll include a slide with acknowledgments or an invitation for questioning. So you can see that totals up to 12 to 20 slides. I don't necessarily expect you to have that many slides for the presentation that you're giving in class. You can use as few or as many as you would like. Just make sure that you print out a copy of your slides to give to me during your presentation so that I can keep it with your grading sheet so I can check back if I have any questions. So here is some additional information about presenting. So you want to give an opening statement to acquaint your audience with the nature and purpose of your research. You want to discuss the same material that's reported in the abstract of your paper. You definitely want to rehearse your presentation beforehand and time it. You want to stay within your allotted time for an oral presentation at a conference to ensure that all of the presenters have an equal time in their program and allowing for the audience to ask questions. You also want to know what you're going to omit if you are getting close to the end of your time that's allotted, because moderators in conferences will hold you to your time and they will force you to stop if you are going over your allotted time. And then you should be aware of those in your audience who have disabilities. So maybe people are hearing impaired or they aren't able to see your slide. So you want to be aware of those things when you're creating your presentation and when you're speaking. Some other things to look at are in your content. You want to practice the opening sentences to capture the attention of your audience. Master the content of your slides. Use short, precise sentences. Practice your transitions from one slide to the next. And then practice closing sentences about your conclusions. You want to speak at a moderately slow rate. Speak loudly. Vary your voice inflection. Speak clearly. Avoid words and phrases that are difficult to pronounce if you can. If you're not sure of how to pronunciate something, you want to check on that. Avoid fillers such as like, you know. Then finally, your performance sections. You want to smile and try and make eye contact with members of your audience. Stand up tall. Don't just read your slides directly. I understand that you get nervous, so if you need to have notes, that's totally fine. But you don't want to read specifically just exactly what you have written on the slide. Try not to fidget or sway or pace or make super distracting gestures. You want to become comfortable with your technology, so to advance your slides using the keyboard or a clicker. If you have a pointer, you want to face the audience when you're using that kind of a tool. So now that you're done with this video, I want you to go into D2L and you can go on to the quizzes section and you will be able to take the 10-question quiz. You have 3 opportunities to take it. It is not timed and the highest score of those 3 times will be recorded in the gradebook. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. And remember that this is due by Thursday at 11:59 p.m.